Buenos dias. I'm Carmen Nanko-Fernández, professor of Hispanic Theology and Ministry, and the director of the Hispanic Theology and Ministry program since 2014.
And I'm Gilberto Cavazos-González. I'm a Franciscan friar. I just got back to CTU again. I'm a professor of Christian Spirituality Studies, and I'm the director of the John Don Scotus Chair of Franciscan Spirituality. I was a student at CTU back in the early 80s. I got here in the fall of 81. But before coming here, there were a few things that were going on already in my life and in the life of the Latino Church in the United States. I was part of the founders of the Texas Hispanic Seminarians Conference that we started when we had our first Spanish Mass at the Diocesan Seminary. As soon as they started with En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, del Espíritu Santo, over half of the Anglo seminarians walked out. And that's when we knew that there were problems in the church and that we were not being taken care of or trained for working in the Hispanic community. I took that experience, I left the diocese, joined the Franciscans. I brought that experience with me to CTU. And my first year at CTU, there was a group of Latino seminarians that began to share our experiences, and we had very similar experiences. And so we began to ask the school, when are we going to be prepared to work for our church? Most of us will end up going back to a Mexican-American church or a Puerto Rican church or some Latino church. But we're being taught how to do ministry in an Anglo church, and we're being taught Anglo theology. The school, we didn't know, had already started talking about that because of the encuentros that you know better than I do. And so in our pushing for it in the school year of 81-82, they decided it's time. And I was privileged to be here when it began. I was privileged to be here with Andres Guerrero,
the author of Chicano.
The author of Chicano Theology.
Yeah.
He was actually finishing it when he was teaching us. Yeah.
Sweet.
And the students actually felt like we were a part of something that was going to grow, and that we were part of something that was crucial for the Church of the United States. I had met the first Mexican-American bishop, SPF, Señor Patricio Flores, and was inspired by, if one of us can become a bishop, then we can do something in this church. We were greatly outnumbered as far as clergy and religious were concerned, but that's changing. And I was here also with Andres Guerrero. I was here with Segundo Galilea. And I remember that course is the one that, unconsciously introduced me to liberation spirituality, or to the spirituality behind the liberation movements and liberation theology, which has become part and parcel of the theology that I do.
The subtitles of your books.
The subtitles of my books are always liberating this or liberating that. But it was exciting to be a part of something that was just beginning. And it's exciting to then have been eventually the director of the program that began when I was a student. So those were the origins. The origin stories were that. Yeah.
And part of it is it's all coming at the same time. It's coming in the aftermath of the first two encuentros in the 1970s, which set in motion the entire Latino communities in the United States, then would have been called Hispanic communities, which were then also fueled and fed by our primos y primas down in Latin America with the the rising of liberation theologies from across Latin America. So you have this exciting time that's with all these different sort of liberation thrusts and Latin American thrusts, and then within the United States, the kind of Hispanics saying, like, wait a minute, we've been here a long time, and if you go back to 1493, when, you know, Colón sets foot in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is still part, unfortunately, of the, in terms of the colonial constellation, exactly, of the United States. Technically, Latino theologies, Latinx theologies have been here since 1493, if we're talking Catholicism. With everything that's better, that's good about it, but also the kind of the sinful, or as Orlando Espín likes to say, the sin and grace dimensions of it all. And so when we're talking about HTMP, the Hispanic Theology and Ministry Program of CTU, being driven from the ground up, so you being a student, and it's stirring amongst Latino students, and then you have the faculty on the other hand having conversations, because CTU is founded in Vatican II spirit, which means it's founded with attention to the signs of the times. And if you're going to pay attention to the signs of the times, how can you miss what's going on in the church? You have the encuentros, you have pastoral ministry, you have the rising up, you have the insistence on vernaculars count, vernacular matters, and Spanish counts too, and even Spanglish.
Right.
And so you have all of that percolating. You have the rise of Latino theologians, who then you have the founding of Actus right around the same time, the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians of the U.S. So all of these sorts of threads are moving, and CTU finds itself as being part of the center of this. Our communities have been here for a long time. And I think HTMP was part of that move to say, to recognize that the United States has a rich diversity of Latino experiences, and that include people who have come here as part of migratory experiences, and people who have been here in what is the USA and its constellations for a very long time too.
If we're not the oldest, we're one of the oldest of these kinds of programs, and we're certainly the first ones to decide that we needed to stress it's not just Hispanic theology, it's Hispanic theology and ministry.
Right. Because the programs that were existing focused on the ministry end of things.
Right.
And we were saying, oh, wait a minute, it's a prime understanding or insight in Latino theologies has been the relationship between teología y pastoral and y de conjunto.
Right.
It's done together collaboratively, en conjunto, and then being a product of the collaboration, de conjunto.
Right.
And so how can we talk about, because what happens is we kid about it sometimes, but that's what winds up happening sometimes with the so-called cultural ministries, is to toss a sarape on it mentality. It's like, if I can say a few words in a language, if I know a couple of what I think are cultural practices, and have some pretty fabric, I'm good, and I'm good to go. And we're saying is, how can you not talk about the theologizing that arises from these communities, and again has very contextualized sort of articulations? How do you ignore that?
Unfortunately, for a long time, the only theological training that we were getting for Hispanic ministry was basically translating Anglo theology into Spanish. In different students, non-Latinos, who really get into the Latino concept of, one, the cotidiano, that God is present in our daily lives, and then two, that theology has to be socio-implicating. ¿Y qué? So what? So you know all this beautiful theology, you can talk about it, you can write about it. ¿Y qué? How is the world a better place? Because you've studied theology. And I think that Latino theologians really want to focus on ¿y qué? So what? You know, we know it, we read it, we write it, but is the world a better place?
So why do Latino theologies matter? Well, because how do you do ministry without also understanding the theologies that are implicated, to use your term? Or it's like, you know, this is a big ball of mess. Good luck, pull the thread. which one is, right? Which is the one, you know? How do you take the political dimension, the religious dimension, the popular religious dimension, the survival dimension, the domestic dimension out of Guadalupe? You can't. Because all of these, and all of this makes up these experiences from different perspectives, unless we don't take seriously what the current contexts are telling us. So why do we do it? Because it is the church. We are the church. We actually have been for quite a while. And then the last group, of course, is what you were mentioning, are students from the United States, predominantly English-speaking students, who for them it's eye-opening. But why do they need it? Because they woke up one day in ministry and they were ministering to one community and their parish changed overnight. And all of a sudden they discover they don't have the tools that they need, the vocabularies they need, the cultural understandings that they need. And I think we also bring another set, like another hermeneutical set of perspectives to how even to read other scholars. Because I think what happens is that oftentimes we'll hear the great names like Ron or Aquinas, and they've been decontextualized totally. How do you talk about Karl Rahner without talking about the influences of growing up in World War II Germany? How do you talk about John Paul II without talking about his relationships with Jewish people before and during his time in Poland, growing up during the war? I mean, you take the New York out of me and you get a different theologian. And that's an admission that we're able to make. We're saying this is where I come from. Why? Because if you can understand what shapes my world, and I try to understand what shapes your world, then maybe we have a space that's created here for a common conversation, one that respects from the beginning that the diversity is a divine thing, not something that we have to deal with because it's a federally mandated policy. But how do we reimagine that difference and diversity are not problems, but instead that part of creation of humanity as well as the created universe, and the divine and the divinity itself.
But my father, one time, he said, I don't understand. We have mesquites, we have pine trees, we have palm trees, and he named a series of trees. He says, why couldn't God just make a tree? That way we don't have to worry about, is it a mesquite? Is it an oak? Is it this? Is it that? And I'm like, that's a good question. And he says, I'll tell you why. Why? Because our God loves diversity. He said, so he made, he didn't make a flower. He made a whole bunch of different flowers. He didn't make a tree. He made a whole bunch of different trees. He didn't make a Mexican. He made a whole bunch of different races and tongues and ethnicities. He says, the fact of the matter is, God loves diversity. And then he went back to his Wheel of Fortune or whatever he was watching.
It's in the heart of God, too.
It's in the heart of God.
That's right. If you're going to talk about doctrinal concepts, it's the Trinity. The Trinity is diversity.
Well, see, that's where I was going, is my father picked up on something that it takes years for theologians to get to. And he just picked it up from life, because life is the context of theology. It's the Sitzenleben.
The locus theologicus. Let's stick to Latin.
Oh, all right. Let's talk it. Let's just say cotidiano.
Cotidiano. It's the cotidiano.
It's the cotidiano.